Good morning, Susanne.
Good morning, Deborah LeeAnn.
And I want to just say thank you to everyone else who listens in and joins us, whether you drink coffee or tea or glass of wine, depending on the time of day for you, or water.
Cheers.
Water. Cheers. Yeah. We were just talking offline. This gene key 33 is kind of ethereal but I think we can bring it down to humanity because we are, I think if we talk about it in a way that makes us all understand, oh, we're under this cloak of forgetting that we're divine beings, that we're actually amazing bursts of light just waiting for to be activated, right? And that forgetting is such a uh talk about a pandemic. I mean, it's a human thing that we are born into, right? Literally.
Right.
Um, and then getting into before we get to Revelation, we go through that amazing thing of mindfulness, which has gotten to be such a buzzword, since yoga and meditation in the last 20 years, everything's we do mindful. And that's kind of part of it, but I like how the expanded way to look at that might feel. And then we can get a little bit into Revelation, which really feels beyond my human brain.
Well, I think it happens instantaneously within someone. So if it hasn't happened to you, it's kind of like, wow, that's way out there. But for some people, it's just their beingness. They, yeah.
Yeah, I also think that a lot of these citic states we we get glimpses. Like we'll have momentary experiences where we're like, whoa, people call them mystical experiences or spiritual experiences or um sometimes chemically altered experiences. And I think that to expect that, I mean, even Richard Rudd, when he talks about some of his earlier experiences, that he knew that this 3-day thing was not going to last. So he just was like, where are we going? I'm just going
Right.
to hang out with this. This is fun energy. So I think once we get, because if we get to the pure states of the Citic, in my mind, doesn't that mean that we're actually crossed over out of our human bodies? I mean, can we hang out there for long periods of time? Or are we going all the way to the far end here?
I don't know. Like part of it is embodying that.
Yeah.
And so we're getting a chance to take those etheric things, contemplate them, and bring them down into our cellular being. They're already part of our DNA, but the energy has to activate it somewhere.
Well, and that's what I thought was fascinating about the mindfulness. So just to make sure everybody's clear, we're talking about gene key 33. The shadow of this gene key has to do with forgetfulness. And there's a lot of ways we can play with that. Of distraction, we talked about a few weeks ago, vanity. We get so caught up in our human small lives that we forget that there's this bigger, broader, interconnected consciousness that we are a part of. Um, and mindfulness is where we start getting into that awareness, and that's the gift. So when we're playing in that world of, oh, look at that. And this is what I've been playing a lot lately, is I can watch myself do my old patterns and go, look at that. Sometimes I giggle.
No,
Sometimes
I
I get
know.
angry.
I know. I'm like, oh, we're going on the
Again.
record player.
So it's that, but it's Armand, that shaman that we work with in my community, that he talks about being an agency, right? Like I get to choose.
Right.
This is that part of me telling that story. Well, let's see. If I go into another part of me, is it going to be the same story? Is my spirit saying the same thing? Is my body saying the same thing? So it's funny how we will hold these different, I'll just go ahead and call them traumatic experiences in our lives, and then we make a whole bunch of stories around them. And that's a great way to forget. It's a great way to distract, great way to self-obsess, which is my shadow. And the mindfulness gives us a chance to notice that we're more than that. We're more than that human experience. But what I like about it's also through mindfulness. This is a quote directly from the chapter, that you discover how to refine and purify your nature so that you no longer create negative karma.
Yeah.
And I think the more that we're doing, so this is where we hang out. For many of us, we've been hanging out in the gift of this for a long time. And then we get these, to me, like little snippets of, oh, that's the revelation. Oh, look. But
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm embodying it yet. I don't know. What do you think? Tell me your.
No, I think that whenever you expressed it really clearly, like when you catch yourself and you see your own pattern, then you can't be a victim of it.
Mhm.
You know? And so that's the shift. And so here's a perfect example. This is from Richard Rudd and the Gene Keys. To be mindful means to catch yourself in the middle of a heated argument and to realize that you've forgotten your true nature. In effect, it's to see your own victimhood. And I think that this week is really about seeing how we play into our victimhood and moving from victimhood into being accountable for your experience.
Yeah.
So it's
So
making
that's like an adult. It's like going from a child who's
right.
like, this happened to me. I hit that sidewalk with my knee. It's the sidewalk's fault that hurt me, you know.
Yeah. We're shifting to this, I'm accountable for my actions. I take responsibility.
Big difference.
And that's what brings us to freedom.
Oh,
right?
And I love that he brings that in. And there are different, I want to bring in a little bit about embodiment of this too. Like you mentioned it a little bit earlier. How can we embody? And I love how he mentioned at some point how when we evolve more and more into the mindfulness, we are literally stretching and morphing our DNA to hold more of who we are, more of who we are becoming. And we're making a difference, not just for our own self, but we're actually healing humanity. Each time we heal one little tiny piece of ourselves, we are shifting the course for humanity. And I love that. Yeah, go ahead.
And I know that in my other parts of myself, I always wanted to change everything out there.
I know.
And it wasn't until I realized, oh my God, this all has to happen inside me first. And everything else then changes around me.
Yeah, the Gandhi quote, right? Be the change you want to see in the world.
Literally. Like,
so when we see something in the media, a certain person who just gets me riled up, and I'll go, okay, where's that in me? Because it wouldn't rile me up if I was able to be fully accepting of all of it. All of it.
Yeah. Isn't that wild?
Good.
Like,
yeah.
When you think about the wholeness of all of us, and even I think he talks about it at some point about we come to this realization of our individuality. And when we get back to the citic state, we realize, oh my gosh, we're all one. So it's like, does it matter? But we're having this experience. What I love about this part of the Gene Key is that it's talking about the consciousness. Here it is. The consciousness within form always has a storyline to follow. The trick is to fall in love with your own story and follow it without holding anything back. So live it to the gusto, baby. And you simply have to have faith in your own storyline without comparing it to somebody else's storyline.
Whoa, and that comparing thing, oh, that brings up so much more stuff for me. I think as we women of a certain age, solopreneur-ish, are moving into a new way of being and serving through our businesses, if you want to call it, our ways of showing up. There's this I've gone off of social media for this very reason, but lately, because I went ahead and created a Threads account, it brings over all my Instagram stuff, and I'm getting all of these notifications, and I'm like, okay, so and so's going live. Oh, look, that person's doing something. Oh, look, I got invited to a new event on LinkedIn by that person. I know all these people. They're all busy growing their businesses the way they do it. Should I be doing that?
Oh, I know, sister. So this is where we have to slow down and dive in.
Yeah.
And go, all right, what does my soul choose to do? What am I here to do? Not comparing, is
Oh
this
my
my
gosh.
time?
Yeah, and I
Is
still
this
want
my
to
time?
celebrate them. I'm actually
Right.
choosing now. I want to be happy for them on their path, doing what they're doing. If it's bringing them joy, and if it's not, I'm just happy that they're doing what they're doing.
Right.
And
Because all of us raise together. So it's not a comparison game at that point. It's really allowing the expression. In fact, it's helping us all expand. And if we understand our truth and understand who we are, we know that everything unfolds in divine timing. You don't need to force it, because if you do force it, it goes flat.
yeah, well,
So,
that's where we're not trusting in the divine. That's one of my gene keys we'll talk
right.
about at some point.
So,
But the forcing versus the strength of no action. Um, and this is something that I think many of us grew up with. And I think Disney is really getting better at retelling the story. But in the past, it was one queen, one princess that was going to become queen. I mean, it was like there was only one, and everybody else would like didn't compare, couldn't live up to that standard, or wanted to be that and were jealous. I mean, it was such an ugly competitive environment. And if you were a woman and a leader, you didn't have uh, that feminine style of leadership. You didn't have that circular, like even the Arthur at the round table, he sat with his knights and they all collaboratively led these charges. And I
yeah.
think, but it's always the one woman. So
Now that's really, I think that's shifting, because there's so many women celebrating other women, because we know that we're coming into a new age of owning who we are and embodying it completely. And
yeah,
it doesn't matter if and I think this is what's interesting about what's happening with the uh, how people identify too. I mean, it's being a sovereign being and choosing your experience and your own story completely. It's the authenticity of each individual, and that is their gift to the world. And if we all get a chance to do that, man, we can make some really magical things happen while we're here.
and there's such a different level of love, connection, support, synergy between all of this
Right.
that and the more and more we're seeing some of the newer movies that are coming out, it's all about like, how can we do this with the plant, like Moana, in concert with the oceans and the fish and I love seeing examples. I'm going to call it feminine leadership, not for the gender, but it's a different side of relational leadership that is until we come up with a different way of trying to not talk about hierarchical, but synarchical, I guess would be a better way to say it. Anyway, we've gotten off into all kind of other things. What can we do as a community to support each other in not forgetting? I feel like that's what you and I do for each other.
Yeah.
And is there a way to support each other in our mindfulness, to support each other to reach those states of revelation and feeling the interconnectedness and the all-knowing.
Well, I think too, just what we've been talking about, celebrating each other's stories and where you've come from. Something that came up to for me this week that I just I'm recollecting is owning my whole story, like where I came from.
Not just part of it.
Right, because I was like, oh, I don't want to look at that part. It was so challenging, or
Mm-hmm.
oh, that was an old life of mine, right? That makes up all of me. Like I can't just choose to weed out certain things because that was what created the multifaceted parts of who I am. That's my gemstone. That's the, okay, lack of a better, term, like, that's the diamond that has been under pressure, under so many
Yeah.
constraints,
The
what
transmutation. Mm-hmm.
could be perceived as suffering. And that's interesting. One of the things that it comes about in Revelation is stage 1 is the hell or suffering that we go through. Stage 2 is the transcendence of that suffering. And then stage 3 is the confrontation with the true self. And so we get to acknowledge all parts of that journey.
Yeah.
Through this.
It's I'm going to have a presence at a conference coming up. It's for the religious women that I have served in the past, and they are having a formation conference. And so it's all of their people that come together. And I was just having this conversation with somebody else yesterday that they call formation, basically your leadership development. It's your personal and spiritual development. It's the informing you so that you can be more fully formed in this life that you are choosing, right? And
Yeah.
I love that term. So we were talking about when is so much coming in too much. And I said, well, each piece, because I said, I feel like each piece of training, years of working with, the feminine presence, all of the leadership circle, each of those things has informed me and formed me to be who I am and how I'm expressing myself in the world. So it's like I'm not that, and I'm not that, and I'm not that. I am this. So what made her helped her understand all of this, because she was just looking at it like all these parts. I said, we're a cauldron. We're like constantly making our magic sauce that's us. And so if we add a little cinnamon of, ooh, this gene key stuff, I really like this teaching, and it, what does it do to enhance who we are and who we are forming ourselves to be? So I love that. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. So I think that we just are, that's the mindfulness, not only of the other practices, whether it be toning or, those are just tools in our toolkit, right? But being present in your relationships are a cauldron of sorts too, to add the spices to our life.
And at times we feel like, oh, I need some Susanne medicine or some Trish medicine or some Liz medicine. So that, and I go back to thinking of all the things I learned, and I started redoing them again in the morning, my morning practices. I was like, I haven't done some of this calling in the gold and letting it flip all my chakras. I haven't done that kind of stuff in 5 years or 7 years. I'm like,
well, I think that's what we're being called to right now in this now moment, is pulling all of the facets together that are the golden nuggets that work for us, and sloughing away the things that are no longer serving us.
Yeah, like cleaning up this office. It's time. Like so much of this, I'm like, oh, that is not me anymore. So it's gonna go.
Well, and that then creates even more space.
Yes.
Right? So it's always a part of the savoring that juicy, delicious sweetness of each of those morsels.
Yeah, and doing like Marie Kondo says in her I love this. So even if I pick up something, I'm like, oh man, I am no longer that style of whatever. That information isn't who I am anymore. Thanking it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You for playing a part in my life to form me. And so I feel like I want to do that with I've got a big basket I'm putting all my giveaway stuff in right now. And each piece is like, thank you. You've been a loving part of helping me become, and I don't need you anymore. Oh, maybe
Yeah.
somebody else can be served by you, you know?
Well, and I think that's part of literally the recycling of nutrients, the recycling of stuff. It serves something else.
Yeah.
So when we don't need something anymore, it can move through the cycle.
I love that.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
well, I have so enjoyed this conversation. I hope if anyone has any questions, I would love to hear from you. I know Susanne would relish having an opportunity to share more on something specific that comes up for you. Um, and until our next time, take care.
Take care. Blessings.
Oh, definitely.